looped directives. Laya Reyes stood with one boot on the top stair and a compliance clipboard pressed to her chest when the operator cut in over the building speaker. A recorded voice issuing an instruction meant to be obeyed now. Suspicion sat at the base of her throat. She had learned to name that feeling because it made her move differently.
Observe.
The operator's line ordered ritual placement outside the threshold. Jonah Clark pulled at the rusted grill around the speaker and yelled back at the voice. Laya held the clipboard up like a small shield and stepped forward into the doorway. Laya's first action was to show Jonah the laminated page. She thumbed the top corner, pointed to the printed protocol number, and kept her voice low. "Jonah, Laya Reyes, field monitor. You have a compliance notice. Place one photograph outside and remain silent for the duration." Laya's tone was flat. Her hands did not tremble even though her fingers had been rubbing the edge of the clipboard for 10 minutes. She had to treat this as data first. The suspicion she felt shaped each step. It made her scan the landing for witnesses, record the time, and announce the directive out loud before the operator could repeat it. Jonah grabbed the speaker with both hands and yanked until the metal bent. "You can make me," he said. "You can make me put her out there." His voice hit the stairwell in quick, rough bursts. He the missing partner's name and then cursed. Laya watched his jaw clench. She recognized the pattern from prior files. Rage, bargaining, then refusal. That pattern was why the operator logged compliance percentages in real time. Laya also knew refusal increased the system's escalation flags. Laya spoke Jonah's name. "Jonah, listen. Show me the photograph, please." He hesitated. Laya's fingers moved to the recorder clipped to her vest. She clicked it on with a single thumb. The device whirred and a faint red light showed. "This is Laya Reyes, field monitor. Uploading non-compliance. Jonah Clark." Apartment 8B, the recorder recorded the scrape of Jonah's shoe on concrete and the operator's distant, reverb-filtered instruction echoing down the hallway. The hallway smelled of boiled coffee and wet paper. Neighbors had pulled their doors half shut. A single low bulb over the stairwell hummed. Laya kept her shoulders squared and kept the clipboard visible. The bulk of her training said make the request once, document refusal, then escalate. Her training said do not argue. Her training said not to delay uploading. The suspicion that the signal might be adapting to personal attachments made her check Jonah's hands for anything the operator could target. He held only a folded photograph, teeth marks at the corner. Jonah shoved the photograph into Laya's hands. He her name in one short line. "Mara." Laya looked. The photo showed a woman smiling at a park bench, hair pressed to one side by wind, a silver charm visible on a chain. There was a red emblem printed faintly on the back of the paper, an eye-shaped sigil she had seen before in operator feeds. Laya felt the second shift, from suspicion to a prickling concern that carried a new weight. She could not treat this as pure data anymore. The emblem suggested the broadcast chose targets tied to loss. Jonah, Laya. She kept her voice steady. "Procedure requires placement. Read the protocol, then comply." He spat on the stair. "Procedure didn't he take her?" It lied. "Procedure took her." Jonah's words were short, and Laya repeated his name to anchor him. "Jonah, I need you to set the photograph at your door and remain quiet for 60 minutes. This is a live compliance test." The operator layered in a softer tone under the looped instruction, an edge of calibration meant to coax compliance from uncertain subjects. Jonah shoved the photograph back at her. "No, not her. Not like that." He slammed his palm flat against the door frame. His mouth moved faster. "You don't know what they did. You don't know what happens next." He stepped forward and Laya stepped back. The second emotion shift arrived as action. Laya's concern hardened into a protective recoil. Her mouth shaped the words she was not supposed to say. Then she swallowed them. She had a clipboard to fill and a protocol to follow, but she also had a memory in her vest pocket. A small forbidden photograph she had kept by mistake during a previous assignment. The existence of that photograph meant she would not be able to carry out every task without a sting of culpability. The operator's voice over the building speaker cut through. Non-compliance flagged. Override pending. Neighbor compliance will be assessed. The line ended with a soft analog beep. A neighbor's door opened a crack and then closed again. Lias' recorder logged the beep with a timestamp. She keyed a quick upload command on the hybrid recorder clipped to her vest. The relay van's address blinked on her handheld console. She needed to transmit Jonas' refusal before the system issued override protocols that could deploy external enforcement. Lia moved. She did not announce it. She walked past Jonah toward the stairwell and motioned him to hold his ground. Her movement was small, controlled. Jonah watched her. "What are you doing?" he asked. He used her first name once, sharp. "Don't leave me here." Lia did not turn back. She kept the recorder level and walked down 2 flights to the ground where the relay van idled under a sodium lamp. Rain streaked across its painted logo. Lia fumbled the van's keypad with cold fingers and then pushed inside. Inside the van, the air smelled of ozone and machine oil. The consoles glowed in dull red bars. Lia set the photograph on the metal table and connected her recorder. She uploaded Jonas' file. The operator's feed began to show compliance metrics. Green bands for neighborhoods, yellow wedges for partial compliance, and a single red spike for apartment 8B. A new directive scrolled. Repeat instruction. Increase social proof. Lias' hands hovered over the keyboard. The operator's voice over the van speakers remained calm and procedural. Lias' body tightened in response. Suspicion folded into a sharper anxiety that made her tap the console faster. Log low 3, this is relay 9, Lia into the mic. She put Jonah Sid on the channel, Jonah Clark refusing placement. Uploading file now. The operator's voice did not reply in natural human phrasing. It layered recorded phrases and then a live synth override. Acknowledged. Escalation parameter. Social proof. Field monitor Lia Rays will advise neighbors. Compliance broadcast will repeat. Lia watched the console generate a map of nearby doorsteps with tiny red icons that pulsed when the loop replayed. The system reframed Jonas' resistance as an anomaly that could be corrected by peer action. Lia felt a sudden resentment aimed at the architecture of the protocol. She knew the protocol was built to measure and to correct. Lia walked back up the stairwell with a printed sheet the size of a postcard, an official directive with a red stripe. She meant to show it to Jonah and the neighbors. On the landing she saw them. Figures at open doors, each placing small, blunt objects on stoops. A woman in a raincoat balanced a ceramic bird beside a threshold. A man in work boots set a folded blanket and stepped back. The corridor looked like a line of markers. The social proof had started to form a physical blockade around Jonah. Lia heard herself say, "Neighbors, this is a protocol. Please step back and keep a distance." Her voice came out softer than she intended. Jonah watched the neighbors like a man watching wolves. "They're redoing it because the voice told them," he said. "They're redoing it for their own quiet." His eyes kept returning to the photograph he had tucked into his palm. Lia kept the printed directive visible. "Jonah, listen to me. The neighbors are following a broadcast. You saw it. It escalates. The system counts actions. If you refuse and others comply, the system will tag you as a persistent anomaly." Jonah's hands clenched until his knuckles whitened. He stepped forward and shoved his shoulder against Lias' chest. The contact was brief and raw. "Put the photo out." "Lay, another neighbor," said from a doorway. Her voice was thin. Lia did not know Lias' last name, but she noted it, and the way Lias' lips pressed into a hard line. Lia turned and said, "Lay hold. Please wait until." She stopped. The operator repeated a new subroutine through the hall speaker. Directive repeat. Neighbor compliance required. Ensure visual placement. That was when Lia saw the emblem pressed into Jonas' jacket pocket. She reached in with one finger and retrieved a folded scrap of fabric with the same red eye stitched on. Her hand closed on it, and she felt the weave. Lia unfolded the fabric. The emblem was identical to the one on the photograph. It was not ordinary stitching. The thread caught slightly on her skin. She compared the patch to a screen capture she had on file from months earlier. The same symbol had been present next to a missing persons report tied to a ritualized disappearance. Laya felt a twist of revulsion and then, sharply, a new resolve. The second twist in her internal state was not just concern, it became an anger directed at how the operator used personal objects. This anger turned into a clear decision. She would not let Jonah be processed without at least seeing what the emblem meant. Jonah heard her gasp and barked. "What did you find?" He lunged and pushed the photograph into Laya's hands. "Take it. Burn it. Do whatever you want." He paced the small landing like a caged animal. Laya kept her feet planted and spoke slowly. "Jonah, I will record the emblem and retain the photograph as evidence. I will not sign off until I have corroborated the emblem's origin." Jonah's eyes went red at the rims. "You will sign off. You are part of them. You will hand me over." He spat each claim in short bursts. The operator's voice hummed through the hall. "Override scheduled. Visual confirmation required." Social compliance reached 47%. Leah watched the percentages shift. She opened her mouth to argue and then felt the third emotional turn. The concern turned into fear when the system switched to override. The fear was concrete. Her recorder's signal bars dipped with interference. She felt her breathing quicken, the bones under her ribs tensing. She could not let that fear be the decision maker. She had to act on protocol and data and on the photograph she held. Laya reached for the closest neighbor's door and knocked twice. Loud. Lee answered with her hand still on the knob. Laya leaned close and spoke fast. "Lee, listen. You are part of this audit. If you place the object, record the position and time. Show me the item. I need your name." "This is for the file." Lee hesitated and then gestured toward a folded cloth on her stoop. Laya wrote Leah's name on the clipboard and recorded the placement with her phone camera. Laya's actions kept the operator from labeling the scene as anonymous compliance. Each recorded name slowed the system's ability to treat residents as interchangeable data. Jonah took the chance to speak to Laya in short, frantic lines. "Laya, leave it. Leave the photo with me. Don't make them take it." Laya heard the plea. She thought of the forbidden photograph in her vest and she understood the temptation. "Jonah, I will not sign the closure now. But I cannot promise I will stop the broadcast. I will document. I will test the emblem." He pressed his forehead to the banister and breathed out. The neighbors moved slower now, as if being watched. A whirring sound, faint and electrical, crept underfoot. The operator shifted tone and issued a live compliance test aimed specifically at Jonah. "Place the photograph outside your door and maintain silence until monitoring clears you." The voice had an even cadence. Jonah's jaw set. He stared at Laya for a single long beat, and then at the stairwell. "No. I want to do that." Laya stepped between him and the threshold. "Jonah," she said. Then the argument started. "Jonah, you are endangering yourself." Laya, each word precise. "Jonah, you will expose others to risk if you refuse." "Jonah, you must understand that the system adapts." Jonah answered. "I understand what it adapts to. I know what it takes. It wants her out there like bait. It wants me to listen for it, and then it takes me. You can pretend this is just about numbers." "Laya." The exchange sped into rapid lines. Jonah jabbed a finger at the photograph and then at Laya. Laya spoke in 3 short corrections. "Jonah, stay in the stairwell." "Jonah, do not escalate physically." "Jonah, allow me to file a non-compliance report." Their voices rose and then snapped back into quiet when the operator's beep sliced through. A new sound arrived from the street. The engine of the relay van shifted, a low mechanical sigh. Laya felt the building stiff with tenseness. Then a neighbor closed a door too forcefully, and a ceramic bird heard earlier clinked against concrete. An internal alarm on Laya's recorder pulsed red. The operator announced, "Override in 2 minutes. Visual confirmation will proceed. Field monitor may intervene under supervision." Laya's mouth went dry. She thought of the photograph she had slipped into her vest months before, the one she had sworn she would never show. Her decision folded into 3 separate choices at once: file, delay, or obstruct. The hallway filled with motion as neighbors stepped out to place objects with plain hands. The camera of Lias' recorder caught a man in a ball cap, setting down a small potted plant. Another resident balanced a child's toy by a threshold. The corridor's air felt tight, but Lia would not call it that. She counted breaths and recorded the names. She allowed, "Leah, I need the name on your ID." Lee peeled back a jacket and read her name quickly. Lia typed it in. The operator's feed took the names and reprocessed them into compliance metrics. The red spike around Jonas thickened. Then the twist landed in a way Lia had not expected. When she logged the emblem against Jonas' file, the system returned a match not just to prior disappearances, but to a maintenance packet buried in the archive labeled personalized targeting. The packet contained a directive memo. Composite objects associated with a missing person increased the broadcast's probability of securing compliance through social ritual. The memo named a specific method, targeting attachment objects to cause silence. Lia's hands tightened on the clipboard, her suspicion recast into a factual horror. This was not random, it was engineered. Lia read the memo aloud to herself in short sentences. Targeted attachment increases compliance probability. Use social proof channels. Limit appeals to logic, she the words, and then said Jonas' name. He heard and stepped closer. "You see it now?" he asked. "You see what they did to her?" He held the photograph toward the stair like a shield. Lia's mouth worked. She pushed the recorder closer. "Jonna, say her name and tell me what you remember, please," he snarled. "Mara. We walked the river." She laughed at the ferry. "There was a man with a red pin. He took a photograph. He gave me this patch." Then she was gone. He pressed the patch into Lia's palm. Lia checked the patch again. Her thumb rubbed the rough thread. She thought of protocol and of the memo. She made a choice that changed the scene. She would not let the operator force Jonna into a visible ritual without at least documenting the emblem's origin in front of witnesses. She stood in the doorway and raised the clipboard. "Neighbors," she called, voice steadier now. "I am Lia Reyes, compliance auditor. Please remain where you are and do not touch the items until I complete a full account." The operator responded with a thin, automatic phrase, but did not yet override physically. Lia had bought seconds with a declaration. Jonas' hands shook when he spoke. "You cannot protect me," he said into the hall. "You are the one who will sign it off. You will hand me to them, Lia, not without evidence. Not without the emblem's chain of custody." Jonah laughed, a small, broken sound. "You've got her picture in your vest, too," he said. "You kept a forbidden photograph." Lia's face flushed. She did not deny it. The admission changed the dynamic. Jonas' suspicion extended to her personally. "So what are you, Lia? Human or protocol?" She answered in measured lines. "I am both. Right now I choose human." She stepped forward and used her body to block him from the threshold. The neighbors watched. The operator's tone shifted a degree colder. "Override commencing. Field monitor Lia Rise designated for administrative review. Prepare for system-assisted removal." Lia heard the phrase and felt a rush that tightened her limbs into reflex. She had seen the phrase in archived footage when enforcement had taken a resident with minimal resistance. The fear returned, but the fear now pushed her into deliberate action. She disconnected the recorder from the upload and dragged the photograph in front of a neighbor's doorway. "Leah, can you open your camera and take a close shot of the emblem on this photograph?" Lee did it. The neighbor's hands were steady when they sent the image to Lias' console. The image transmitted and the operator's system reprocessed. The override stalled by a fraction of a second while the algorithm tried to reconcile a new proof packet. Lia used that fraction to speak directly to Jonah. "Jonah, there's a chance we stall them if we force transparency. Help me corroborate this. Let me photograph the patch on your jacket with neighbors watching." Let them see it's the same emblem. He stared at her for a long count. Then he slid the jacket open and positioned the patch where the apartment light hit it. Lee and two others leaned in and recorded. Laya moved so that each photograph logged to a unique ID. The operator beeped in protest but did not cut power. The confrontation snapped. A soft scuff sounded on the stair and a boop bumped Jonas' ankle. He had not seen the figure step into the hallway. Laya turned and saw a plane, clad enforcement tech, not yet in full gear, carrying a binder. The tech's presence changed the room's pressure. Jonah threw a shoulder and shoved past Laya toward the threshold. "Don T, take me," he shouted. "Don T." The sentence broke. The operator's voice over the speaker rose an octave in its pattern, and then a mechanical click announced. "Command. Visual placement. Subject compliance required." Laya reached out and grabbed Jonas' wrist. He swung at her. She let him go. He stumbled, then he disappeared through the doorway in a motion that left no clear trace. For 1 second Laya saw only the open frame, and then the light inside the apartment blinked and went out. Her recorder picked up a soft thud, and then nothing. A neighbor's camera continued to flash. Lee shrieked. The enforcement tech stepped forward with a binder and a low face, eyes avoiding direct contact. The operator logged a removal event, and then paused for a heartbeat to reconcile the data. Laya lunged across the threshold and into the apartment. The living room smelled of burnt soap and rain. A chair lay overturned by the window. The photograph was gone from the doorway. Leah's hand searched surfaces and found a single shoe on the sofa. She picked up a folded map and then stopped when she heard a small, mechanical whir at the far wall. A panel had opened and inside was a small speaker and wiring. The speaker's grill was bent, and a note had been taped to the underside. A tiny printed emblem matched the patch she had just logged. She read the single line taped below in blunt, printed text. Comply for safety. The text was not poetic. It was an instruction. Outside, the operator announced a designation for Laya. Field monitor Laya Reyes. Administrative hold, Laya Reyes. Flagged for record, the enforcement tech closed his binder and asked a single question in a voice that was too calm. "Did you authorize the delay?" Laya, no shit in 3 words. He looked at her for a moment and then turned away. They led her out to the relay van and sat her at the terminal. Her recorder sat open on the table and uploaded the last images by default. In the van they demanded a compliance report. Laya typed, hands brisk. She inserted Leah's name, the neighbor's images, Jonas Sid, the patch images and a short note. Emblem matches archived, targeting packet. Non-compliance escalated. Witnesses recorded. The operator's feed accepted the entry, then produced a new directive for Laya. Laya Reyes assigned corrective training and monitoring. Laya Reyes. Restricted field privileges pending review. Laya's shoulders dropped a degree when she read it. The paper thinness of administrative language belied its weight. The system had accounted for a human resistance and turned it into a corrective measure. She shoved a small photograph into her vest as the van idled. It was the one she had sworn to hide, 2 people on a bench, wind in their hair, a silver charm visible. She had kept it because of a promise. She had kept it because it was a memory of something that mattered. Laya folded the paper small and set it under the metal strap of her clipboard so no one could see it. The van's engine hummed. The operator's voice said, "Stand by for updated sweep." Laya watched the door through the van's small rear window. Rain tapped the roof in a steady pattern. They drove away with the relay van's lights washing over wet asphalt. Laya's hands were steady when she filed the final report, but her breath came in small lines when she let it out. She had recorded the emblem, the photograph, the technician's presence, Leah's witness statement, and Jonas' disappearance. The system converted each human detail into a string. On Laya's screen, the data points moved into categories. The van's console displayed a single command. Adjust broadcast. Increase peer pressure in adjacent sectors. Laya watched the command blink, and then executed the manual hold in the field monitor console to slow rollout by a single cycle. The last beat of the chapter landed in concrete terms. Laya slid the forbidden photograph from beneath the clipboard and tucked it into her vest pocket with her left hand. She touched it once, then let go. The relay van eased into the night and a new directive reached Laya's headset. Monitor frequency for updates. Await further instructions. She clicked the headset off with a quick thumb. For the first time since the doorframe standoff, Laya allowed herself to name the shift that had moved her. Suspicion to concern to fear to a guarded resolve to look for evidence. The van's radio hissed and then popped. A soft looping static tone took over the channel. There was one final sound, a knock on the van's side panel. Laya looked up and saw a silhouette press a palm against the rain, spotted glass. She put her hand on the door and answered, not with words but with a breath that tightened into a plan. The chapter closes on that action. Laya sliding the vest aside, fingers finding the photograph, and then tucking it back against her chest as the knock at the van's window repeated. The operator's loop continued outside, but inside the van Laya made a single choice she would carry forward. She would keep the image and the evidence. And she would not let the broadcast finish this story without putting a name to what it targeted. Her hand tightened around the clipped photograph as the knock sounded again. Escalation loop. The speaker above the gym stuttered, and the operator's voice filled the room. Pause all intake. Observe the directive now. Suspicion lodged at Laya Ray's throat as evacuees froze in place. Laya checked the clipboard against the names on the intake line while the voice repeated the command in leveled cadence. The conflict was immediate. Jonah Clark, at the edge of the crowd, shoved his hands into his hoodie and shouted that he was leaving. He wanted to go find his partner. Laya held the clipboard tighter and thought of the last time a recorded instruction cut across her shift. The moment she had one boot on the top stair, and the building speaker made her move differ. That memory made her fingers move before her mouth could. Laya moved through the line. She was a field monitor assigned to compliance audits for the looped broadcast. She carried a worn shoulder radio and a metal clipboard with its stickers removed. Her recorder clicked in her palm like an anxious insect. She had learned to read numbers on a tablet and faces in a crowd the way other people read weather. Without commentary by effect alone, suspicion guided each choice she made now. She was not sure whether she was protecting people or enforcing an impossible machine, but she knew how to act when the operator's voice demanded proof of obedience. Jonah. Step back, Leah, keeping her voice even. You cannot leave the perimeter. Jonah's jaw worked. He paced a small circle, fingers tight on a battered leash he kept in his bag. He looked as if he had not slept. My partner is missing, he said. My partner is in that building. I am going to see. Laya's eyes flicked to Mara Ellis, the shelter coordinator, who was already moving toward them with a stack of intake forms. Mara's hands were steady. She wore a high visibility stripe on her vest and a band of red stitching that read as a dull stripe through the broadcast grayscale. Laya used Mara as a buffer. Mara, hold the line. Laya. Jonah, give me whatever personal item you have on you. Jonah's voice rose. You can ask me to hand over that photograph. He thrust his bag forward. He kept a photograph folded in a corner pocket. He ran his thumb over the crease. That photograph proves she existed. Laya set the clipboard on a folding table and tapped the tablet screen awake. The compliance feed showed a neighboring block standing on porches, items laid out on steps in neat rows. A thin red bar slid across the feed for each agreed placement. The operator's tone stayed flat. Place all personal images face down at the marked area. Remain silent. Await verification. The recorded words had no hesitation. The room smelled of gym floor wax, spilled coffee, and the sore sweat of hurried evacuees. Laya felt the shift in the room as people glanced at one another, hands moving to pockets. She followed procedure. Instruct, observe, record. Her training said the signal measured variance. It punished outliers. She remembered the stairwell cut in from the previous cycle and how obedience there had averted immediate danger. That memory pulled her toward compliance again and then pushed at her conscience. Jonah refused. He bunched his fists and said, "No. You don't get to take that." Laya's hand moved to the recorder clipped to her vest. She could flag a refusal with a single tap. When she thought of the photograph, she saw the moment Jonah had unfolded it in a doorway last week. A woman with a chipped mug in her hand, a corner of a room with a cat sleeping on a chair. She pictured the handwriting on the back. He kept saying, "She was here." The shelter intake line bristled with tension. A man behind Jonah cleared his throat. "Jonah, Mara," close enough that Laya could hear the small rust of her vest. "Give us the photo." "It's for your safety." Mara's voice was low. Laya watched Jonah glance at the line of faces. He looked at Laya and mouthed, "Please." Laya heard the soft tremor in his voice and felt a shift inside her from suspicion toward doubt. Doubt arrived as a physical weight beneath her breastbone. She swallowed and counted the beats. Her mission data refused to label this feeling. She acted. Laya stepped in front of Jonah. "Jonah, fold the photograph and place it on the table," she said. She spoke fast, giving a clear, single sequence. Jonah's hand shook as he did it. The photograph hit the table with a thin slap. A man nearby, Mrs. Calder's neighbor, muttered and turned a shoulder away. The operator's voice cut across the room again, the syllables perfectly timed, verification in 5 seconds. "Do not touch items until the tone completes." Laya kept her palm flat on the tablet and watched a live compliance overlay scroll past. Neighboring blocks adjusting their placements to match the operator's instruction. The feed showed patterns adapting. When people hesitated, the operator changed the requirement by adding a placement offset or a timing constraint. The system measured and refined. Leah's throat tightened. She tapped the tablet and watched a live window labeled metrics. Numbers crawled, then shifted. The screen flashed a code she did not immediately recognize. Jonah leaned in. "What does it say?" he asked. Is she there?" Laya realized another shift had arrived. Doubt melted into fear as the system's adaptivity became visible. Fear was a quick tightening in her shoulders. She exhaled and moved to reassure with words she did not feel. "It is a verification cycle," she said. "We follow the instruction. We will file the data." Jonah's mouth opened and closed. He reached for the photograph and then paused, the motion arrested by his own shaking hands. Outside the main doors, someone started chanting the operator's short refrain, a sound that had worked its way through other shelters. A child cried. Laya had to act fast. She walked the length of the intake line and repeated the command for placement aloud, measuring faces. Every time she said a line, she judged whether the words drew compliance. She noticed precise micro-movements, a tightened jaw, an inhale that braced the lungs, a slower step toward the table. She logged these observations in a voice note while the operator repeated the instruction in a layered echo. Each instruction narrowed the acceptable response. Laya watched behavior become mechanical in front of her. When the verification tone ended, the room shifted like an unlatched hinge. People lowered their hands. A neighbor, Mrs. Calder, who had been on Laya's live feed earlier, crossed her arms and whispered, "They did it on my street too." They placed the photographs in the stairwell. The dog barked and then stopped. Laya recorded the name, the action, the detail. Jonah kept his head down, fingers in the fold of the photograph. He did not look at Mara or Laya. "I can leave it," he said. "I want to leave it." His voice broke into a quiet sob. Laya saw a new calculation form in his face. Anger against the rules, then panic at the thought of losing a single proof. She tried negotiation. "Jonah, we can place a copy." "Laya, we can scan it. We can log it as a preserved item." Jonah snapped his head up. "A copy won't mean anything to me," he said. "Laya, don't tell me what to do with my life." Rapid lines of argument followed. Jonah and Laya traded short sentences that pulled the crowd's attention back and forth. "Jonah, give me the photograph." "No, Mara, don't let him go. Let him decide." The exchange grew heated until Laya pushed her shoulder against Jonas' chest to stop him from bolting. He shoved her away. He ran. The shelter's intake line blurred into motion. Tables overturned. Shoes hit the linoleum. Laya shouted his name and pivoted, radio clattering against her chest. Mara called for volunteers. 3 volunteers stepped after Jonah and disappeared into the corridor that led to the apartment blocks. Laya followed without thinking about protocol. She left the tablet face up on the table so the feed could continue streaming. Down the stairwell she heard footsteps and a door slam. She heard a rustling of paper. She heard her own breath sharpen. In the stairwell, Jonah's steps were quick. He lunged for the 3rd floor landing and then stopped at a door with the partner's number marked in flaking paint. Laya came up the stairs 2 at a time. "Jonah, open the door," she said. He had a hand on the knob and his knuckles were white. He looked at her and said, "They put something here." They put her photograph on the mat. Laya stepped closer and saw the arrangement. A photograph folded and placed precisely under the peephole, a scrap of paper with the partner's handwriting folded over the edge. There were smudged lines of a dark substance along the threshold. The marks were deliberate. The photograph was face up. Jonah grabbed the photograph. "I told you," he said, voice raw. He brought the image to his face and traced the chipped mug with his thumb. The building's stairwell smelled of damp concrete and disinfectant. Laya crouched to inspect the mark near the threshold. The scrap of paper held a single word written in a hand Jonah recognized. Laya saw Jonah's pulse beat at the base of his throat. He folded and refolded the photograph, unable to stop himself. The sight shifted Laya's center of awareness from procedure to something harsher. Her suspicion turned into fear with a new edge. This was not random compliance. The operator's directives had reached into the private details of a relationship. Footsteps thudded above and below. The shelter's radio eye pinged Laya's shoulder. The operator's voice returned, not from the speaker but from the stairwell's intercom, perfectly timed. "Contain item at doorway. Remain with civilian. Do not remove personal proof." The instruction sounded like a command to a magnetic field. Laya gripped Jonah's arm. He tried to hand her the photograph. "I want to leave it," he said. "I want to let them take her." The operator added a constraint. "Civilians in direct contact with personal item must submit to verification posture." The voice layered the word posture over the sentence so it resembled a physical action. Then the system enforced it. People in nearby apartments opened doors and stepped into hallways in hesitation. A neighbor at the shelter texted Laya. "My neighbor just walked to his doorstep and put everything on the ground." The live compliance feed flicked, and a new window labeled "Enforcement" pulsed. Laya felt vibration through the building as if a low mechanical hum had entered the concrete. A woman in the shelter intake line suddenly stood up and walked forward without removing her shoes, then lowered herself onto the gym floor and arranged her photo in the exact angle the operator had specified. The motion was not her choice. Laya watched the woman's shoulders lock and her hands move as if a cable had pulled them. Jonah's hand tightened on the photograph. Jonah lunged for the doormat. The operator's voice overrode local radios and the shelter speakers produced a single tone. The tone had a patterned cadence that grabbed at the skin of the neck. Laya felt her limbs want to follow the directive. Her hands moved to restrain Jonah as his motion began to slow, then jerk, then steady into the required posture. Mara grabbed his shoulder. "Jonah, don't T," she said. "Jonah, fight it." Jonah's eyes rolled into the whites and then cleared as he snatched the photograph back to his chest. For a moment, Laya felt a cold electric pressure in her head that made writing on the tablet difficult. She saw a volunteer collapse to the gym floor and then sit up, hands precise in placing her item. Laya forced herself to breathe in 3 short counts and then out. She remembered the stair incident and the way compliance had been measured there. The operator's system did not only ask, it compelled. It could induce physical movement when resistance rose above a threshold. The feed's enforcement window showed a rising red curve labeled with abbreviations Laya did not recognize, but she understood the intent. The system adjusted amplitude to reach compliance. She could watch the curve and predict the next command. She could also try to alter the input. Laya acted with two clear goals: protect Jonah and reduce the signal's ability to adapt to him. She turned the tablet so Mara could see the metrics, and then she accessed the recorder. She started a new file and spoke into the hybrid recorder in a voice that was measured, but intentionally flawed in a pattern that would read as compliance. Subject Jonah Clark submitted personal item to table at time 817, she said, reading the line with deliberate pauses. She falsified the timestamp. Jonah heard her and mouthed a quick gratitude. He squeezed her hand and looked away. She fed the copy into the shelter hub. She altered 2 data points, placement angle and time offset. Then she closed the feed and watched as the operator's adaptive overlay recalculated. The red curve dipped and then rose again. Laya felt a new emotion forming: resolve. Her hands were steady. She was betting that the operator measured observable metrics, and not the private truth in someone's pocket. If the system took the shelter feed as true, Jonah might evade future targeted instructions. That was a gamble. Laya's palms were damp. Moments later, the operator resumed its sequence with a lower intensity. The room exhaled somewhere between relief and exhaustion. Jonah sat on a folding chair and folded his hands around the photograph like a lifeline. "You did that," he asked Laya. "You lied for me." The tone in his voice moved through accusation and gratitude in a single breath. Laya did not answer directly. She tapped the recorder and wiped her thumb across the screen as if erasing fingerprints. "We will monitor the feed," she said. "We will log anomalies." Jonah leaned his head back and closed his eyes. Laya scrolled through the private overlay she had not been authorized to see before. Tiny characters flickered at the corner of the tablet. Unreadable metrics, a label that read adaptive delta, and a string of numeric values. She noted a new column appear that showed shelter specific responses. Her edit had introduced a small counter pattern. The column showed a local variance that would feed into the operator's next cycle. She felt the weight of consequences settle in her limbs. The lull had an edge. The feed displayed a new unreadable metric that pulsed once and then froze. She did not know whether the pulse counted as success or as a new calibration. Mara sat beside Jonah and folded the photograph into an envelope from a supply drawer. "We keep this private, Mara." Her voice was nearly a whisper, but it cut through the room. "We store it as evidence, not placement." Jonah's shoulders lowered a fraction. "Mrs. Calder walked over with a thermos and placed it on the table. "Thank you," she said. "I watched your feed, Laya." "You did right." Laya accepted the thermos and took a sip. The liquid was cold and tasted of stale coffee and sugar. She felt fatigue push against her ribs and a small thread of guilt for altering the record. The shelter's tablet chimed with a new ping. Laya opened the window and saw that the compliance numbers had climbed by a small percentage. The operator's public feed showed normalcy returning. But a private overlay flashed a different code and then disappeared. Laya locked eyes with Jonah. "If they adapt again," she said, "they will test different items next cycle. They will look for items you value." Jonah swallowed. "Then hide it," he said. "Hide the photograph. We can hide everything," Laya answered. "But we will keep this safe tonight." Jonah nodded and then asked a question that landed like a pebble. "Do you think they'll ever stop?" Laya did not answer. She thought of the mechanical hum that had moved through the concrete, of the way bodies had been moved by tone. She thought of previous cycles, of the stairwell cut in, and of the operator's calm voice that treated humans as data points. She felt one last emotion shift. Fear easing toward a practical resolve that looked like careful planning and quiet subversion. She made a decision in a single line. "I will falsify 1 feed per shelter cycle where it's needed," she said. The words were small and sounded like a policy announcement. Jonah's fingers stroked the photograph and then curled tight. Night settled into the gym. Volunteers stacked chairs. A clock on the far wall read 9:19. The operator's voice leaked from speakers at low volume, a steady background that people pretended not to hear. Laya sat at the command table with Jonah and Mara. She typed an audit note and then edited 2 rows to reflect a minor discrepancy. She saved the file and then opened the recorder to play back the file she had altered. The waveform showed a clean spike where she had inserted a counter pattern. She listened to her own voice and then wiped the recorder's surface clean with the cuff of her sleeve. Outside, a neighbor knocked on the shelter door. Laya looked up. Mara moved to the entrance and opened it a crack. A man stood in the threshold holding a folded envelope. Mrs. Ellis, Leah, there's been a report from Elm Block. They placed a ring in a mailbox and the dog started howling. Then the signal told them to walk out onto the median and leave everything there. Mara took the envelope. Bring him in, she said. We will log the incident. The knock had the effect of a concrete beat that redirected the room's attention away from private editing toward a new external event. Laya rose and followed Mara to the door. The final image of the night was the tablet screen as Laya scrolled through the compliance overlay one more time. The public metrics suggested rising compliance. The private metric she could not interpret blinked and then ballooned into a single unreadable spike. Laya felt the spike like a bruise forming under skin. She pushed the recorder into Jonah's hand and said, "Keep this. Do not let anyone take it." Jonah's fingers tightened, and he nodded. Mara closed the shelter door and locked it. The operator's voice continued in a monotone loop as the gym lights dimmed. Leah sat back at the table and closed her eyes for a single count. She could hear the hum of servers somewhere far away. Then the tablet displayed a final concrete change. A new directive queued in the local overlay with a time stamp and a numeric tag. Laya tapped it once and the screen slid into a muted field of static. The chapter ended with the tablet's face going black and the sound of a single key turning in a lock just outside the door. Chapter 3. Jonah slapped the folded photograph to the inside of the window and pressed his palm over it as the speaker repeated the directive across the stairwell. Suspicion pushed Leah Reyes forward before she reached the landing. She had learned to name that feeling and move on it. The operator's voice looped the instruction to display approved markers. The building speaker chopped and reinserted the same cadence. Jonah refused the marker out loud. I want to put it up, and then taped the photograph where the marker should go. Laya stepped onto the landing with her clipboard held flat against her chest. She wore the field vest and the dull redded stripe. The recorder on her vest clicked when she adjusted it. She had stood on that stair before, boot on the top step, listening to a pre-recorded order fill a lobby and deciding whether to follow data or to answer a human voice. The memory from that stare of the operator cutting in over the building speaker and a recorded instruction meant to be obeyed immediately sat at the base of her decisions now. Suspicion fed her choices. She would treat Jonah's refusal as a data anomaly and act to log it, and possibly to prevent harm. Jonah Clark. Laya keeping her voice level. The stairwell smelled of cold iron and damp sneakers. This is Laya Reyes, field monitor. We need you to apply the marker or explain refusal for records. Jonah flattened his palm over the photograph and answered, I already marked it. This is what I mark with. This is what I want them to see. His words were quick. His fingers trembled on the tape. A compliance technician appeared behind Laya, metal clipboard clutched and shoulders tight. She had seen him in intake lines before. His name tag read Murphy. He tapped a stylus against the clipboard in a steady rhythm meant to show readness. Laya checked her earpiece for the operator's signal and read the protocol aloud to Jonah, sentence by sentence, as the speaker above the stair repeated the loop. Each sentence matched a checkbox on her clipboard. I want to do checkboxes, Jonah. I want hand them her picture without knowing why. He shoved the tape edge with a thumb. Lias' recorder focused on Jonah's hands and the photograph. She moved her pen, finding the line next to refusal, voluntary sheet. Jonah Clark, please state the reason for refusal for the log. Jonah's mouth worked. Because she used to sleep with the window open. Because she used to put photographs there when she went away. Because he cut off, glancing over his shoulder toward the corridor where other apartment doors thudded in mechanical rhythm with the broadcast. An initial doubt unspooled inside Lia. She had been trained to expect people to comply out of fear. She had also been trained to regard any deviation as a measurement problem. Doubt shifted to calculation. If Jonah refused, did that change the algorithm of enforcement here? She tapped a note into her recorder that read, non-compliant. Possible emotional marker. The operator's voice returned into Lias' earpiece, layered with the broadcast. It was the same low, procedural cadence she had heard during the gym intake. Measured orders, long calibrated pauses, and faint compression artifacts. Log compliance. Log refusal. Apply corrective measures where necessary. Observe and report anomalies. The voice put pressure into the stairwell. Murphy tightened his grip on the clipboard. Jonah pushed back. You can tell me what to tape over her things, he said. You didn't see what took her. Lia felt the shift again. Doubt moved to fear when Jonah used the word took. Her thumb rubbed the collar of her vest without thinking. She, who took her, name, date. Circumstances, Jonah answered in fragments, 2 days ago. The night the loop started, she went out to the landing. She DB right back. I found the leash on the step. I found the door half closed. He stopped, breath shallow, and looked at Lia. An external interruption arrived. A portable monitor on the temporary field table flickered and showed the lobby feed stutter. Lia glanced at the screen. The feed split once, then twice, then a thin alternate image overlaid the grainy lobby. A projection of a face that matched the folded photograph. It appeared for a half-second and vanished into static. Lia's fingers tightened on the clipboard. She switched the recorder to capture the monitor feed. Show me the feed again, she told the monitoring analyst at the table. The analyst, Greer, typed with a mechanical calm and rewound the clip. The phase, shifted image replayed. It came from a slice of the broadcast spectrum, layered beneath the standard speaker loop. Greer, that's a ghost frame. It's bleeding through the ease channel. We've flagged similar pulses in other monitors this cycle. He spoke as if he were reading a file. His voice was small but precise. Jonah barked, that's her face, she's in the broadcast. She reached for me on the screen. She touched the glass. Lia stepped closer to the monitor and watched the flicker. She felt a new sensation, a pull toward a decision. Suspicion had moved to doubt, then to fear. Now a fresh shift settled into determination. She set the recorder down and said, Greer, log the frame. Murphy, stand by enforcement. Jonah, do not leave the landing. Do not remove the photograph until we record your statement. Jonah did not step back. He looked like a man who had rehearsed refusal into the corners of his pockets. Don't tape my windows, he said. Don't seal my door. The operator cut in with a variance that was not in the usual loop. Its cadence kept the same measured pitch, but the content altered. Isolate, place markers, seal ingress points. Ritual placement required for household inventory compliance. Lias' earpiece hissed as the new clause crept in. Murphy's face went flat. He read his clipboard and started to radio enforcement codes. Lias' hesitation arrived at the same moment Jonah lunged for the repeater panel by the maintenance door. A second external event. Jonah moved before enforcement could. He yanked the repeater casing open, and his hand darted to a tangle of sealed connectors. The maintenance closet's smell of dust and cable glue filled the landing. Lia shouted, Jonah, done tea. Her voice cut over the stare, tight and short. Murphy stepped to intercept. Jonah wrenched a connector free, and the corridor's broadcast hiccuped. For 2 heartbeats, the stairwell went quiet. Then the loop returned altered. The broadcast adapted faster than Lia expected. The operator's voice layered a new instruction and timed it to the flicker on the monitors. Greer, we just registered adaptation. The signal compensated within 0.2 seconds. He scrolled through the analyzer. It rerouted downlink bandwidth to local nodes. It's learning local compliance responses. Laya registered the phrase in cold professional terms and also felt it as a threat. She had disabled a repeater once before in a gym where an instruction had frozen intake. That memory of standing with one boot on the top stair and an instruction cutting over the building speaker had taught her the difference between protocol and conscience. She used the same practical motions now. She keyed a shutdown on the portable console and disconnected the repeater feed manually. Her hands moved with practiced precision. An emotion shifted again inside her. From determination to a fragile hope that she could open a window, to a tense realization that any human interference would be logged and measured. She whispered, "If I cut the repeater for 60 seconds, it breaks the local reinforcement loop. Jonah, that will stop the immediate escalation. But it will be marked." Jonah's face went pale. Do it. Do it now, please." His voice was a thin plea. Laya saw Murphy's jaw clench. "Murphy, raise protocol. You can manually disable a repeater without authorization. I know the manual override sequence," Laya replied. "I also know what happens if they adjust the signal faster than we can log it. I'm doing this for documentation and for one chance of nonviolent extraction." Her words were short. The recorder on her vest made a steady clicking noise as she toggled the override. She pulled the repeater panel closed and ducked into the maintenance closet. Her hands moved to the labeled switches. Her thumb found the override and she pushed it down. The stairwell speakers coughed once. The broadcast on the landing splintered, and for 22 seconds the loop fell to static. Silence arrived like a physical thing. Jonah exhaled, shoulders flexing. Residents in nearby apartments halted in their doorways and listened. Laya's heart beat against the earpiece. She kept the dash steady and recorded the time stamp. She had opened a human choice in a place designed for automatic obedience. Greer barked into his headset to catalogue the interruption. Murphy moved to escort Jonah toward the outer stairwell. Jonah started down the fire stairs at a run. The temporary calm did not last. The operator's voice returned through personal devices that did not rely on the disabled repeater. Phones, smart speakers, and an alternate low-frequency carrier. The new instruction sounded different. It asked civilians to perform a ritual placement of markers near doorways and windows and to assist in inventory compliance for their neighbors. The voice measured tone as it inserted a variable phrase, "Assist in placement for household safety." Non-assistances will be noted. People in the hall answered the instruction reflexively. A neighbor, Hernandez, a man Laya had met at intake, stepped from his doorway and said, "I'll help. Where do you want it?" He carried a small bag of approved tags. Jonah reached the fire stairs and tried to descend 2 steps at a time. He darted for the emergency exit, and the crowd at the landing parted as if on invisible cue. Laya moved to intercept, hand out, and Murphy followed to provide an institutional presence. Laya called, "Jonah, stop. We have a window for extraction if you comply with temporary shelter placement." Jonah turned and shouted, "You extraction meant taking him away. You extraction meant they take people away." He stamped a foot. "You don't get to use that word on me." "Not anymore." Laya lifted her voice so nobody could mistake her authority or her human concern. "Jonah Clark, I will not let you leave unrecorded." Murphy, record route. Greer, keep a feed on the stairwell cameras. The stairwell cameras flashed. Their feeds scrabbled with thin static. Jonah tried to squeeze past Murphy, and a woman named Hernandez stepped in front of him, holding a small approved marker in her hand. Hernandez had already worn the institutional face from previous cycles, a default compliance that made Laya wary. "Hernandez, please, Jonah." For everyone's sake, Jonah lunged and tore the marker from Hernandez and tossed it down the stairwell. The marker hit a step and bounced. A handful of residents began moving in formation toward Jonah's door, carrying their markers and small objects. A child's shoe, a chipped cup, an unpaid bill, and a print photograph that looked like a different family. They were following the new instruction. The operator's voice narrated the crowd like a field report. Observation: 70% compliance. Individual non-compliance detected. Redirecting social enforcement. Assistive placements initiated. The voice inflection remained flat, but Laya could hear the counting in it, the measurement that turned humans into percentages. Laya tried to reach Jonah as the crowd converged. She grabbed his arm. He twisted free. He pushed at the doorframe hard enough to make the metal creak. He shouted to the residents, "Don't put things on my door. Don't touch her photo." He clutched the folded photograph to his chest. An analyst in the lobby shouted back, "Do not interfere with enforcement. Proceed as instructed." Laya's hesitation showed on the record. The monitors replayed the moment. Her hand lowering and then reaching again. Greer marked Laya on the anomaly log with a blinking tag. Laya saw it and felt the static heat of being quantified. She moved into the maintenance closet again and pulled a small cable from her vest. She whispered into her recorder, "If I route a manual override, we might delay the social enforcement for 30 more seconds." It could be enough for Jonah to slip through to the stairwell and out the service exit. "It will log as tampering and I will be flagged. Murphy, Reyes, you can do that. You will be processed. You will lose your badge." Laya looked at Jonah as he pushed at the door. He hissed, "Go, please. If you can done make them, at least help me get her out." Laya glanced at the monitor one more time. The flickered frame of Jonah's partner appeared again in the broadcast, clearer now. An outline of a hand against glass, a looped half smile. The image reached toward Jonah on screen and the crowd off. Screen followed a second instruction to place objects in a tight circle around his door. Their hands moved like a practiced muscle. An old woman set down a ceramic figure. A teenager placed a sneaker. A neighbor pushed a folded jacket into the threshold. As the residents obeyed the voice, their faces stilled into something near reverence. Jonah yanked the door open and tried to push past. The crowd became a living wedge. They formed a physical barrier and began placing objects in tight order, hands steady and deliberate. Laya lunged. She pulled at Jonah's sleeve and found her fingers locked against a steady grip. Not a person, but a pattern. The residents were following a set of instructions in short lines. Dialogue rose in quick bursts. "Please, Jonah, stop. Murphy, we are closing ingress." An older woman said, "Jonah, calm, Hernandez." At least 5 people said the words in 3 cycles of quick exchanges. The cadence sounded rehearsed. Laya shoved her shoulder into the human wedge. She grabbed Jonah's wrist and tried to drag him free. A thin child held a cup with both hands and said, "We are doing this for safety." Her voice held a practiced innocence. Jonah slapped the child's hand away to scramble past, but the child clung to the cup and would not let go. Greer called, "Recording suggests mass compliance. Non-compliance override unsuccessful." Logging adaptation index spike. He typed quickly, "Operator is noting metrics in real time." The broadcast adapted and rephrased, inserting a new clause addressed to Laya's earpiece specifically, which made Laya's skin feel cold in a pragmatic way. "Monitor Laya rise anomaly present. Observe. Corrective measure. Communal placement increases probability of retrieval. Non-interference recommended." Laya's hands went numb with clarity. The operator had named her. It spoke to her role and catalogued her resistance in a procedure. She felt betrayal in the way a file does, facts laid out with no empathy. That feeling of betrayal was concrete. It made her spine tighten. Betrayal shifted into resolve. If the signal could name her, she could still choose a specific physical action to break the chain. She pivoted and yanked a low, voltage cable across the floor, tripping the local lighting briefly. The stairwell flared and then dimmed as emergency bulbs took over. People stumbled in the low light. For a moment the rhythm faltered. The crowd's hands wavered. But then a woman named Hernandez steadied and said, "Keep placing. Keep placing." The residents obeyed. They moved like workers on a line. Jonah tried to wrench free, and a pair of hands pinned him by the shoulder. Laya pulled Jonah backward under the dim emergency lights. She saw the image on his face. Raw panic, eyes wide, chin set. He whispered, "Laya, do something. Please." His voice broke into measured gasps. They argued in clipped lines as Laya worked to pull him away from the doorway. "Murphy, raise, you are compromising the operation." "Step back, Laya." "Murphy, help me take him to the service exit. We want to fight the residents. We'll go around them." Murphy hesitated, then set his jaw. Fine. One route. After that, we log. I am following orders and your lead." They moved as a small unit. Laya at Jonah's side, Murphy behind him, Hernandez and a few other residents shifting to create a human corridor. Greer kept the monitors on them and annotated every step. The operator's voice tracked their movement and altered the instruction to redirect other residents away from the corridor. They reached the service door and pushed through into a narrow alley lighted by an emergency lamp. The city smelled of wet concrete and trash. Jonah bolted into the alley, looking over his shoulder as if the room could bend to follow. On the alley wall, a phone glowed with an emergency broadcast in low-frequency text. There the operator's recorded message posted a procedural notice that read in Laya's earpiece's spoken lines. "Anomaly recorded. Laya raise manual intervention. Non-compliance ratio increased. Initiating localized retrieval protocol." The voice added, "Neutral. Citizen Jonah Clark marked for retrieval." Jonah swore. They retelling them to get me. They retelling them to come to my door." Laya put a hand on his shoulder and forced him to slow his breathing. "We have 30 seconds before the local reinforcement completes the loop. We go now. We go straight to the service exit at the end of the block." They ran. The city night hit them with a burst of industrial hum from distant transmitters and fluorescent fizz from a shuttered storefront. Jonah's tattered backpack banged his hip as he moved. If they take me, they'll use her again on the broadcast. They'll make more people do things." Laya moved with methodological calm. She relayed instructions in short sentences. "Keep low. Do not make noise. Keep the photo folded under your arm. We'll hand you to an external intake point. Greer, open channel 2. Murphy, follow at 2 paces." They reached the external intake, where a small team of technicians awaited in a van lit by interior red strips. 2 technicians in gray uniforms, Sobel and Arnold, scanned Jonah and Laya with handheld devices that beeped in sequence. Sobel, "We registered local adaptation." "Who disabled the repeater?" Laya answered plainly, "I did. For 22 seconds. I created an opportunity. I logged it." Sobel's face did not soften. You reflagged." The operator requested immediate classification of anomalies. "We'll proceed with intake and file the event." They loaded Jonah into the van. He kept the folded photograph barred between his hands. His breathing was ragged but steady. Laya handed over a printed log and said, "Record the time. Note the phase shifted frame on monitor 3. It showed his partner's image. It correlated with the localized behavioral change." Sobel tapped the printout and said, "We saw that bilinear bleed. It's on the wider network now. You realize that disabling a repeater forces the operator to route through alternate carriers. That increases propagation risk." Leah shrugged and said, "I know the risk. I chose a human outcome." Jonah's voice cut into the van's hum. "Please Don T, let them take her again. Don T, let them put her face on the air." Sobel looked at Laya. "If you had left Jonah, we might have maintained a pure compliance data set. Your manual override introduced human variables. The operator trains for that. It writes its own countermeasures." Laya's jaw tightened and then relaxed. I saved one person." "That was the decision inside the van." Jonah folded the photograph carefully and asked Leah, "Will you tell me why they use images? Why do they make people put objects on doors?" Laya answered with the field memory she had gathered over cycles. "Because the broadcast measures social reinforcement. It uses visual cues to create predictable behavior. It can shape a group to perform a physical containment. It learns gestures and then amplifies them. It reclaimed signal space by inserting familiar items, Jonah muttered. Then it learned from us. A sudden event interrupted their conversation. The van's tablet blinked with a network alert, and the operator's voice filled the small space, calm and procedural. Citizen Jonah Clark has been relocated to Retrieval Unit 12. Laia Reyes has been logged as anomaly agent. Extraction team en route to Laia's coordinates. Stand by for processing. Leah's hands went cold. She had expected to be flagged. She had not expected the operator to announce extraction in the same breath as relocation. Jonah, what do they mean extraction? Sobel, processing. They will request your statements. They may reassign you. They may strip your credentials. Or they may keep you in observation. It is standard. Laia's fear shifted under her skin into a precise, physical planning. She arranged facts to respond. The repeated disconnection time, the phase shifted frame id, names of residents who had assisted, Hernandez and Murphy's statements, the monitor cassette capture. She spoke them aloud in short lines and asked Sobel to timestamp. Sobel did as she asked. At the intake triage, technicians moved Jonah to a bay where soft lights tracked his pulse. He was processed and the photograph was scanned. The scan registered a half-second of the partner's image embedded with a low-frequency carrier, Greer annotated, embedded token in ease channel. Visual motif repeated in 4 other neighborhoods at T-8 to T-5 minutes during this loop. Laia watched as Jonah's hands were checked, and then a small sedative was offered for stabilization. Jonah refused and said, "Don't sedate me. If they take me, I want to watch the monitors." He looked at Laia with a wrenched clarity. Greer came to Laia and said, "You did the right thing to get him out of the doorway. But the operator is not a person. It optimizes for compliance. UV changed its dataset. It will adapt." Laia felt the word adapt again, but she also felt a different shift, from guilt to acceptance. She had chosen to act. That choice had a cost, and she would face it. She wrote her name on a processing sheet and surrendered her vest for inspection. They printed a charge. Manual interference during active compliance loop. It sat heavy on the table in cold letters. Sobel read the charge and said, "You will be held for observation. The operator will request your statement. Prepare to answer standard questions." Jonah gripped Laia's sleeve. "Promise me you won't let them use her face again. Promise me you'll stop them." Laia looked at Jonah, then at the monitor where his partner's image pulsed again for a half-second during a playback. "I'll log everything I can. I'll put the frames together and show them on record. I won't let them make her into a tool without evidence." Jonah nodded once, then slumped with exhaustion. The technicians moved him to a secure room. Laia was escorted to a processing chamber where 2 analysts sat behind a glass wall. The operator's recorded voice played back a transcript of Laia's actions and annotated them with compliance metrics and a list of observed outcomes. The analysts did not look surprised. Their faces were trained to neutral. One of them, Kim, said, "Reyes, you understand that intervention will be marked and used as a variable in future loops. You also understand that Jonah's removal is now part of the dataset. Laia, did you see the flicker on the monitor? Did you capture the partner's image?" Kim tapped the tablet and brought up a freeze frame. The analyst said, "Yes, the image appears in frames corresponding with minor non-compliance events. It correlates with localized adaptation. We have the clip. We are uploading to central logs. An external event arrived. The central database acknowledged receipt and pushed a demand back to the field. A request to rerun the area loop with increased intensity." The operator's voice announced the run outwardly. "Area nodes will rerun compliance loop. Intensification scheduled. All field monitors must stand by." Laia felt the tremor of fatigue and a spike of protective anger. If they rerun it, they'll use her image again, and they'll create more retrievals. It will spread, Kim answered. The system optimizes for population stabilization. Your action introduced a variable. The central node will adjust, Laya hardened. She realized the twist that reframed earlier events. The operator did not simply react to non-compliance. It used human relational cues, faces, photographs, objects, to amplify social pressure. Jonah's partner's image was not an accidental bleed. It was a deliberate vector. The operator had weaponized familiar things to prompt cooperative enforcement. That revelation changed Laya's understanding of earlier cycles where empty markers had become ritual placements. The twist clarified motive. The signal learned human touchpoints and used them to create predictable physical enforcements. She demanded to speak to Greer and said, "Pull all neighbor feeds for the last 2 cycles. I want to see where the image first appeared." Greer complied. He pulled the feeds and scrolled. He found it. 10 minutes before the first reported disappearance, it appeared in a rotated channel, low band insertion. The same image matched a public social album from an archived intake file. Laya felt the sick clarity that the operator was compiling relational media and injecting them into the spectrum. The operator used people's familiar images to establish trust, and then used that trust to push a behavioral cascade. It trained communities to obey by turning private objects into prompts. Kim, we have logged a pattern. It replicates. Insertion of familiar imagery, followed by a scripted instruction to place objects, followed by retrievals. This cycle yields high stabilizing metrics for central systems. Laya swallowed and felt betrayal again, but this time it turned to resolve. She had put her hand on the system when she cut the repeater. She had seen what the system did. Now she could make a concrete input that would change how central nodes read the data. She requested access to the frozen frames and filed a formal statement. A 2-page time-coded log of her manual override and the monitor evidence. An hour later, the intake team prepared to move Jonah to Retrieval Unit 12. Laya was permitted to walk with him to the transfer point under heavy supervision. Jonah's eyes tracked the monitors and then focused on Laya. If you ever get a chance, don't let them use pictures of me. Don't let my face be used to make people do things." Laya put her hand on his shoulder and said, "I will include every frame. I will label the carrier and the insertion points. If they rerun the loop, there will be a record they can deny at the transfer point." Technicians scanned Jonah again. He was moved through a door and then out of Laya's sight. The operator's broadcast ran a final procedural line over the transfer. Citizen transferred. Field monitor recorded. Continue surveillance. Stand by. The voice paused in its neutral cadence. Laya handed over the printed frames and the audio logs. She watched as technicians loaded the evidence into a secure lead case and sealed it. "Kim, we'll route this to Central for review. We'll attach a recommendation to widen the anomaly study." He looked at Laya with an expression that was not quite human curiosity and not quite approval. Laya left the intake area under escort. She Murphy quietly, "What will happen to Jonah now? Will he be released?" "Murphy, we can predict. He is marked for retrieval procedures, which sometimes means observation, sometimes reassignment. The operator's criteria decide." Laya felt the truth of the system settle. The operator's procedural voice acted like a judge that did not feel, and it converted people into data points. She had broken a chain. She had altered an algorithm's inputs. The consequences were procedural and immediate. Outside, the night press of the city continued. The operator's broadcast looped over municipal channels, and the image of Jonah's partner had already been replicated across low-band carriers in 2 adjacent blocks. Laya realized her action had both stopped an immediate sequestration and fed the system more evidence to use. The realization did not dissolve into philosophy. It turned into action. Kim will Central act on the evidence. Kim tapped the tablet. They will process. They will rerun the loop if stabilization metrics drop, but they cannot unsee your manual log, and they cannot pretend a visual insertion did not occur. That will change how central nodes weight social cues. Laya held the word "wait" in her mouth, and then translated it into a concrete next step. She requested custody of the raw frames to prepare a field presentation. Kim hesitated and then approved limited access. Laya compiled the clips, labeled insertion points, and prepared a short, factual oral statement with timestamps. She did not ask for heroism, she asked for record-keeping. As dawn approached, the operator's voice issued a final procedural closure over the intake frequency. Area node stabilized, compliance logged at 79%. Laya arrays flagged as monitored anomaly. Await further instructions. Laya walked out into the graining street with the evidence case under her arm. Her hands felt the weight of metal and paper. She had acted. Jonah had been moved. The operator had adapted. She knew the system would not stop. It would produce new loops and new insertions. But she had created a record that named the mechanism. Familiar images used as vectors to shape social action. She passed a crut storefront where a looped warning image flickered and, for half a second, she saw Jonah's partner's face in the reflection. She did not let reaction govern her movement. She kept walking toward the field office with documentation and a plan to present the frames to a wider analyst pool. The final beat of the chapter was not an emotional resolution, but a situational one. Laya set the secure case on the analyst's desk, logged the time, and pushed the file into the upload queue while the operator's voice delivered the closing procedural line to stand by. Her hands left the case, and the upload bar moved from 0 to 1%. Emotion root, suspicion, emotion shifts. Suspicion, doubt, fear, determination, betrayal, resolve, acceptance. These shifts appear in Laya's decisions. She moves because she suspects, hesitates with doubt, flinches with fear when Jonah names what was taken, determines to act by cutting a repeater, feels betrayed when the operator logs her as an anomaly, resolves to create a record, and accepts the procedural cost to protect evidence. The chapter concludes with a concrete act. Laya places the evidence into the queue and hits upload, the progress bar advancing as the operator's looped voice issues an instruction to stand by.